Retro is retro. All this and more coming up on This Week in Retro.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
15 years of LGR.
Super Turbo Final Fight Championship Edition Alpha.
£15 billion wasted.
All this and more coming up on this week's show. Up-to-date news for out-of-date tech. Hello, Dave.
Hello, Neil. Let's start off with the good news. Tell everybody the good news, Neil.
The good news. So last week, I told you we were going into panel for the final decision on whether or not we can be trusted to have a child. We had a unanimous yes decision at the end of the panel, which is wonderful. And then there's one more high-up priest in a throne somewhere that has to sign that off within 10 days. So the next week or so, fingers crossed, that will be signed off. It should just be a formality. We had that with the last panel. Mm-hmm. And that's it. We can get on with it. So I've been painting the room more. I've been building furniture. I've been making videos of our trips to IKEA. And I think I've shown you some of them, me throwing a banana at a wall. Yeah. Videos for the child to get to know us before they meet us. So lots going on. It does mean at the end of July, I will move into what will essentially be paternity leave. So Dave is sorting out guests to fill there, so the show continues, and I'll do a little announcement on the Cave channel as well, so people know what's going on. But I will disappear for a bit, but I will be back. How big the bags under my eyes will be when I come back, we'll see. It's not going to be easy. But I'm really looking forward to it. It's very, very exciting in our household at the moment, Dave.
Yeah. Something else arrived through the post for me and for you.
I got something in the post. Yeah, do you want to go first? Yay, we're both holding up our boxed copy of Seekanoid.
Yes, Seekanoid, yeah. From our friend Hoffman. We don't have any kind of skin in that game, but he has made a phenomenal Amiga game. So much effort has gone into it, and the boxed edition of it is fantastic. It's got the properly pressed CDs. Remember, we talked about limited run games doing their fully commercial things and then using CDRs in it. Well, Thalamus that made this have used a proper CD.
Shall I go through the contents here, Dave?
Sure, go through the contents. What have we got?
It's published by Thalamus. First of all, we've got a box that feels like a proper box. It's lined nicely. It's chunky.
It's exactly the same size as a Psygnosis, the earlier Psygnosis boxes.
Yeah, not big, not MS-DOS big box.
No.
Good size Amiga box. We've got the manual, very nice, with, I noticed, a shout out to you, Dave, in the special thanks section as what were you, a tester?
Yes.
Yeah, game testers. Dave Velociraptor. So that's nice. You've got a credit in a published game. We've got a badge. We've got a Thalamus sticker. We've got a single black floppy disk. Looks very nice. I don't know where they got their stock from, but it looks like a brand new floppy disk. I've got a signed postcard from Hoffman. I've got just a postcard that I can send to you, Dave, with the game title screen on it.
And I could send you mine as well.
I've got the Amiga CD32 version of the game on a CD and a little slip cover. So that's nice. I've got a set of stickers. And then I've got sealed in a packet here the soundtrack on a CD. And then I've got another, what's this, a bookmark. And it says on the back of it, would it have killed him to use a couple of more colours on the Amiga? That's anonymous. So there's a quote from someone. Because Seekanoid is a very stylized, almost 8-bit looking game. But so in a static screenshot, it looks like that. But when you play it, there's particle effects and all sorts going on.
And there's sound in it, yeah. So Duncan made a video, which he'll link, of some gameplay of it. And someone mentioned this morning that Thalamus, their new pre-order game, Roguecraft for the Amiga, has gone on sale. So I'll put a link in there in the show notes as well if you want to buy that. There's something special about buying a new big box game There's something about it, Neil. It's nice.
What did we pay for this? This was the OMG WTF edition, which it came with the T-shirt as well. We've got the T-shirt. Did you get
I just got the normal deluxe edition. I think mine was 30 quid.
I got the T-shirt. I think mine was $49.99. When you consider all of the things you get in there, the quality of it, and the alternatives like limited run games, what people pay for that, that's a bargain.
Yeah. I presume Thalamus aren't making much money. We sound like we're advertising it. We're not. We do,
but it's just good. A good product delivered well on time to a high quality deserves praise. So happy to give it.
There you go.
Yeah. Good. What else has been going on this week before we get into the stories proper? Kickstart happened, didn't it? So,
I
didn't
Everyone
get to go.
Seemed to have a great time. Everyone.
Yeah. Well, because of the news I didn't get to go. I was building furniture. Did have a session at the cave, which was great. And shout out to Katrina, who came over not once, but twice, last Saturday and this Saturday to the cave, or Catriona, as I've called her in the past, Katrina, who also brought some friends with her. Wonderful to see her. And hopefully you'll make another trip sometime in the future. And where was I going with this, Dave? What were we talking about? Kickstart.
Yes,
so I didn't make it to Kickstart, but I saw the photos on social media. It looked like it was as good as last year's event. I had some lovely messages from people saying, "Oh, we missed you, that we didn't get to see you this year." That was really heartwarming. So thank you to people who sent that. And I did see a picture of Pete Cannon DJing at 2 a.m. And that's the point where I thought, 2 a.m. on a Saturday night and then having to get up for the expo again on a Sunday. I'm not sure if I could have handled that as much as I wanted to see Pete Cannon. A bit late for me, Dave. What about you?
Yeah, I everyone seemed to have a fantastic time. Reese took his Atari stand there and he was not spat on once. Rob Smith, we covered Rob Smith's amazing machine last week. He got it working, he took it with him, and amazingly, it plays Car Wash when it works. So all day long, Disco was blaring out of his blinged up floppy disk cleaner, which I thought was amazing. He'll have a video out on that very shortly, I imagine.
I don't think it was finished to the point where he was doing other people's floppy disks. He told me he cleaned and washed the same floppy disk about 1,000 times over the weekend. I'm
not sure if many people brought in dirty floppies. I'm not sure.
Not something you tend to have in your pocket. Yeah. And then one final delivery. I had a delivery of crocheted dinosaurs from Dave himself for the kids' bedroom. Thank you, Dave.
You're welcome. It's nice to buy the things that I can't justify buying for myself, like knitted dinosaurs, as much as I want them.
Should we get into our stories?
Yeah. My friend Clint, and I'm allowed to say that, I sometimes chat to him. I sometimes chat to him in DMs. He is my friend. Has been on the show twice as well. He is celebrating 15 years on YouTube. Now, I don't know if Clint was the first retro YouTuber. I'm sure he wasn't. But he started when YouTube was young, and he's kept going for 15 years, always been sincere and always improving his craft. There's something warm and reassuring and cozy about watching an LGR video. Clint may have started by calling the show Lazy Game Reviews, and he's later dropped that to just LGR. But the truth is, it's never been lazy. He just tries to make it look that way. From fan favourites like the Megaluminum, it's aluminium, it's not aluminum. Megaluminum Monster.
Megaluminum, yeah. It's hard to say it our way. Mega Aluminium Monster.
To Cool Crab Drinking Soda, he's kept DOS gaming alive. He's released a video this week, and it is, of course, worth a watch, but where he talks about how things have changed in the 15 years since he started. And he's actually said something I've said before, and it's not a contentious point, that this is a great time to be playing old DOS games. It's never been easier. In fact, I watched a video from Phil's Computer Lab a few days ago about DOSBox X, which is a really good kind of GUI, a GUI for DOSBox that makes things a lot easier. A week ago, I watched a video from Shelby at Tech Tangents, who's also been into her, where he talks about 86box We've had abandonware sites back 15 years ago, but now not so much abandonware. We've got GOG now, something we didn't have 15 years ago.
We've got Exodus knocking around.
Yep. With GOG, you can buy a game already packaged up for just a few dollars. They're normally buttons to buy on there. They're ready to go. I think you're paying for the convenience, really. Some are even finding their way onto Steam now. And if you have the old files, of course, perhaps from abandonware, or maybe you have, like me, lots of them around, then you can get it going in DOSBox or a DOSBox X. I've used front ends in the past to make DOSBox easier too. I've even set up DOSBox in the past to have a hard disk with all my games mounted on it, making it easier to play.
The rise of DOS front ends is really interesting because back when we were using DOS in earnest, the front end was a batch file. Basically, you might make a batch file to make it easier to run games. But it really does make sense to have some easily accessible front ends for DOS games. Because if you imagine like a Super Nintendo, for example, if you had to configure an auto-exec and a config and get the right amount of memory before you could even launch a game, it adds that layer of complexity that as more and more people get into gaming, more and more younger people want to know the history of gaming. That is such a hard barrier to break through. How much effort are you going to put into trying to break through that if it's your first time in 2024?
Yeah, there's certainly a charm in playing with the DOS stuff, but it's not the case that you should have to do that just to play Ultimate Underworld. If you want to play Ultimate Underworld, then I want all the barriers to be gone so you can just double click on something and get straight into it.
Yeah, or you want to try Wing Commander and it's running far too quickly. And you don't, where do you even start if you don't know DOS to fix that? Yeah.
If you want something better than all that, then my recommendation is Shelby's video to get you started on 86box. 86box emulates each part of the hardware for a much more accurate result, although it is significantly more demanding on your system. I mean, these days you can emulate a Gravis Ultrasound or even a Voodoo card. And there is, of course, Mister as well. It's a mature core on there which allows you to do loads of DOS gaming in a nice and accurate way. DOSBox, of course, is the easiest way, but it's not always perfect with games that expect things to run at a certain speed because DOSBox sometimes it doesn't manage to get the frame rate or speed that you want along with the sound or graphics at the right speed. So X-Wing, for example, struggles a bit to get the frame rate just right when you get to the Death Star. Wing Commander I've not tried in DOSBox, but it's one that strikes me as possibly a contender for not being the right speed. Because when these DOS games were being made, no one really thought that DOS would be around for so long that the games would run too fast on new systems. It wasn't something they thought about. I do like with 86box you can set up several different virtual machines. So you can have your early 80s XT, you can have a 1990 EGA 286 and go on to have a 1994 DX2 66 and finally a Pentium with a Voodoo. You can choose each part of the machine you want to use for the task. And it's getting better. It's only getting better. I've got real machines here, 5 of them on my left-hand side. And while it's all great, it's in no way necessary. You don't need real machines. You can just emulate, or you can just watch Clint on LGR build and show you the real ones. Now, 15 years is a long time, Neil. Where do you think the cave will be when you hit your 15-year anniversary? And when does your 15 years actually start? When are you counting it?
I guess it would be if we hit the 15-year anniversary, and started in earnest on the 1st of January 2017. So 8 years to go to get to 15, not even halfway. Well, about halfway there. Yeah.
Yeah, but you could claim to have started earlier, couldn't you?
The channel was registered 2010, so I could say it's 14 years, but I didn't do anything for about 7 years other than some eBay listings, so that would be cheating a little bit. But yeah, forget about me. Let's go back to Clint. He really is a staple of the retro world. I think someone who, this is really important to me. He doesn't court drama. He doesn't take cheap shots. He doesn't resort to clickbait unless it's tongue-in-cheek, funny thumbnails. And that shines through. And what he does it for the love of it. And we watch it because we love the enthusiasm that he has and the joy that he has in exploring and discovering things whether that's something we're familiar with and we're discovering it with him, or something we're not familiar with, or something we are familiar with and we just enjoy watching someone else discover. That's why react videos are so popular, isn't it? When, videos with millions of views of some guy listening to your favorite song and supposedly having never heard of Led Zeppelin or whatever ridiculous claim it is. I've never heard this song in my life. I'm and pulling a face when watching it of happiness and satisfaction. That's kind of what Clint does in a lot of his videos for me, but in an authentic way. He's discovering things that sometimes I've tried out, and I love to get his reaction to it and see how he does or doesn't enjoy it. He is without doubt the inspiration behind my channel when I did start 7 years ago. So I've got a lot to thank him for just being there and doing what he does. You've mentioned DOS. He also covers a lot of other topics. Some of my favorite videos are some of those earlier ones where he's in his comfy chair and he's got an Amstrad CPC or a ZX Spectrum or something that's a bit alien to him, living in America, and just figuring it out. And that's really lovely. The old videos have got as much charm as the new videos. But yeah, as for the cave, in another 7.5 years, I hope we're still going. I hope that we've got a bigger, better, and more accessible museum, really, because the direction that we've gone in is to create the museum, and everything around the museum creates the opportunity for videos and content, and different ways of doing it. So that's kind of the direction I've gone in. Clint's chosen to carry on doing things at his place. Has there ever been rumors of a museum? Because I feel like Clint might have talked about a museum in the past.
I think he's talked about doing a few other things. He did some teaching. He did some lecturing.
That's right. Yeah.
So I'm not sure if he's ever thought about a museum or not. Yeah. He must have thought about it, surely.
His whole house must be a museum. He moved house not so long ago, didn't he? Last year. Yeah. And I think when he's been on the show, he's presented from his storeroom, which just looks wonderful.
Yeah.
Floor to ceiling, awesome retro stuff. Who knows what his plans are in the long term? But yeah, I would love just to keep on doing what I'm doing and grow the museum bigger and bigger. Really, that's where I'd like to be at 15 years. But I'd just be happy to make 15 years. Here's a question though for you, Dave. What was retro when Clint started out? So he would have started out 2009 if it was 15 years ago.
Oblivion, for example, and Morrowind wouldn't be considered to be retro then. That's true. Knights of the Old Republic, loads of early 2000s games wouldn't be considered to be retro. And I think you would really struggle to say that Windows 98 stuff was retro in 2009. So all that stuff that's definitely now feels like retro, to me at least, and to many people. I know that there's people out there who kind of feel like the 8-bits are retro and go beyond that. It's not, and that's fine for them. But yeah, there's lots of stuff that wouldn't be considered retro now, that is considered retro now.
I'm just looking at hardware. In 2009, we had the release of the Core 2 Duo E7500. We had some Core 2 quads. We had the Phenom 2s and we had a Sempron 140, and we had the Athlon 2 X2 250. We were certainly where we are now in terms of a discrete graphics card and a multi-core processor. Yeah. So, for example, in October 2009, you had the Core i7 960 4-core 3.2 gigahertz. You could comfortably sit down with that now and do all your work, do all your word processing, all your spreadsheets, a nice bit of emulation. It's amazing, really, isn't it, that a 15-year-old machine today, because what would a 15-year-old machine have been when Clint started out in 2009?
So that would take you back to
1993? Is that right?
Yeah, 1994. So you'd be talking a 486 if you were lucky.
1994. Sorry, 1994.
Yeah. A 486 if you were lucky.
You weren't using a 486 in 2009 to do your web browsing and your
no. If you were using a 486 in 1999, you were really struggling.
Yeah.
So things have, the pace has definitely slowed down.
Exactly, the pace of retro has slowed down, and I think what was retro in 2009 it's pretty much the same stuff that he's going to be covering and that I'm covering in 2024, really, isn't it? Because maybe coming forward a bit to Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, that sort of thing. But
you covered one of the things you covered early on in the channel is DOS and the Audition sound card, which is the Yamaha.
Oh yeah.
YM18 or something, whatever it is, 18F card, sound card, based on the OPL. You covered that, and 2009. Would you say that's retro? Because that was a late 90s card, so you wouldn't be saying that was retro, would you?
Well, you would, because it was a Sound Blaster clone, really, wasn't it? And it was ISA, so you would.
ISA, yeah.
ISA.
It would be on the threshold, perhaps.
Yeah. Anyway, back to Clint, Dave.
Yeah. So we love Clint. We love LGR. Go and watch his video and say something nice in his comments. Make his day. Say something nice to Clint. We are sponsored by PCBWay.com. Neil, who are they?
PCBWay.com?
Yeah.
Who are they, Dave?
Yeah.
Who are they? They are PCB.
What are they? When are they?
They are 3D printers. They are all things to all men, Dave.
Yeah. Particularly their shared projects. Database of lots of different little projects you can do, little expansion cards, all sorts of stuff. They'll do CNC milling. They'll populate your PCBs for you. They will send it to you all the way from the manufacturing at a reasonable cost.
They will sponsor projects. If you've got a cool project, get in touch with them and they might sponsor you. There's a whole section on sponsored projects. A lot of them seem to be quite fast and explodey. There's a rocket and there's electric vehicles and racing cars, but I'm sure you can get them interested in other things. Less dangerous things. Yeah.
Or more dangerous things.
A lot of racing cars for some reason.
Anyway, PCBWay, thank you very much for sponsoring us.
Thank you, PCBWay.com. The side-scrolling beat-em-up or brawler is a genre that we've all experienced in some form or another. Kung Fu Master is celebrated as the first in 1984 in the arcade, and Jordan Mechner gave us Karateka that same year on the Apple II. The one-on-one combat of Karate Champ was simplified and scrolling added so that you could slap down an endless conveyor belt of enemies. Kung Fu Master saw you ascend a temple, facing increasingly difficult and, I must say, annoying enemies. I always hated the little green goblin guys that were too small to punch, kept coming at you. And then eventually you'd reach the top of the temple and face the big boss. This is a theme that was lifted directly from Bruce Lee films, and then one that would be repeated throughout future releases in the genre. Dave?
I never reached the top. I played it loads and loads on my Amstrad. I got so far, and I thought I was doing really well. It was so difficult.
Yeah. It had I'm pretty sure the sound effects in Kung Fu Master must have been lifted directly from Bruce Lee. Then in 1986, Renegade was released in the arcades, and a couple of years later we got Target Renegade, published by Ocean, which was a huge hit on the 8-bit micros. Well, at least in the UK it was. I think it got an NES release as well and a couple of other systems. But I didn't know a Speccy owner that didn't have Target Renegade.
Do you not think that Renegade is really the first one in this? Because it was the first. It was the first one where you had more than just left to right movement. You had enemies that came on, and you would see them coming, and then have to deal with them, and you could run away from them. Lots of stuff, and you couldn't do in Kung Fu Master. Okay. Renegade was the first one when things really started to be the way they were for most of these.
Yeah, Kung Fu Master it feels quite sterile, the environment, and you've got a single plane left to right coming at you. Renegade, you could move up and down the screen.
Yeah, not a plane as in with wings.
No, not a plane as in wings. Dirty city streets, subways, a story of revenge, and like you say, trying to almost herd the enemies to get them in the order that you want to take them down.
Yeah. And you're thinking, do I have time to do all my moves on this guy before the next one's coming behind me?
Yeah. And also things like headlocks and throws and things like that start to come into it. So
and the pummel.
and the pummel. The genre starts to evolve at this point. And then came the big one for me, a game whose music you could hear booming across the arcade, or in my case, it was in a pub, actually, where I first saw this game before I got sight of it. And that game was, of course, Double Dragon. Loved the Attract music on that. It wasn't original. We'd had Renegade before it. It was at times frustrating, but it did have that cool factor that made you want to play through it, especially with a friend. Great two-player game. And you start off on the streets. You emerge from a garage door after Maria has been kidnapped. It is Maria, isn't it? By the guy with the metal jaw and the big gun.
We're going to get comments if it's not.
We are. I better check that in a minute. And then you fight your way from the streets all the way through to the big boss in the final layer. And then you have to fight each other at the end. That's the fun bit of Dragon's Lair. And there were many more like it. There was Bad Dudes. There was Golden Axe. There was Altered Beast. Would you count RoboCop? I'd count RoboCop. Before he takes his gun out, you're punching people.
Yeah, I feel as if there's two genres there. And Kung Fu Master and RoboCop are one genre. Black Tiger's kind of in between the two of them, would you say?
I haven't played so much of Black Tiger, but yeah.
But yeah, definitely Renegade starts the genre for me, not Kung Fu Master. It's got its roots in Kung Fu Master, definitely, but the first game in the genre really is Renegade for me.
Renegade for you. Let's move from the first to the peak. And for me, the peak of side-scrolling brawlers was Final Fight. This came out in 1989. And this is where all the elements for me came together of those previous attempts. So you had a massive, chunky characters without the slowdown that you perhaps got in Double Dragon. That was infuriating. You had a choice of characters, each with their own backstories and moves. You had Cody, Guy, and I was always Hagar. I liked being the big wrestling dude that could smash everyone up. Who did you choose, Dave?
Hagar.
You went for Hagar as well, yeah. Had varied levels, and of course it had that bonus round where you get to smash up the car, which was good fun. It's a game where it feels immensely satisfying to thwack someone with a lead pipe and then eat some floor chicken, as became popular floor food part of the beat-em-up genre, or a floor apple if you're feeling healthy. And so when an Amiga port was released, I rushed to the shops to buy some blank discs and make a copy of it because I didn't have £25, and I rushed home and I played it, and I got to say I was perfectly happy with it. I've got a feeling it was a single disc game, or at least maybe the cracked version I had was cut down, but it was only a single disc game, 720k on the Amiga, and I was really impressed to see those big sprites shifting around on the Amiga screen because Double Dragon on the Amiga, it did have a bit of slowdown and it didn't have such chunky sprites, and it proved that this was possible. Had a cracking title tune, which was different to the arcade by, probably going to mangle this name, but Jolion Myers, also known as The Judge. So check that out. And there's also a great cover of that by the Fast Loaders, a nice rock cover. So check that out as well. Anyway, it seems others weren't as easily pleased as me. Zero Magazine, well, they did okay. They rated it for 87, which was a good score, and described one of the enemies as looking like Jeff Minter on steroids in their review. While others were less forgiving. Amiga format, 60%. But
60% is, for anyone who's not too familiar with British magazine ratings, if you go below kind of 65, it's terrible.
Yeah,
and they didn't give out a wide range of ratings. It was kind of like 65 to 85 mostly.
I always thought sort of 80 plus. 80 plus was a good game.
Yeah,
generally
60 was them saying, "Do not buy this.
Do not buy it." But in the review, most of their gripes seem to be at the original arcade's design and the repetition of it, rather than any actual problems that the Amiga port brought to the table. Now you're shaking your head.
Yeah, why would they rate it based on? I mean, it's a great arcade game.
Yeah. One of the main gripes looking back on it is slightly washed out colors, or quite washed out colors on the Amiga, and the palette that was used. But we'll come back to that. The side-scrolling beat-em-up genre would fizzle out as we went into the 90s. We did have games like Ninja Turtles and The Simpsons that would keep it alive for a while by making it more of a social genre with 4 players. It was fun to gather around and play that. But we'd soon have our fill of this kind of game in the arcades. And home games such as Streets of Rage managed to perfect the style while adding just that little bit more depth. Not a huge amount more, but just that little bit more that you needed for the home market. But it was always Final Fight that I'd think back to, and the video rental store where we had that cabinet in my town where I'd rush to after school with friends and get all nostalgic about. Anyway, I'm talking about all this because there is a new attempt to get a better version of Final Fight for us Amigans. This isn't the first time we've talked about such a project, because there was one last year by Prototron, and that was a complete rewrite of the game. And he did finish that in February of this year. I have to say that went under the radar a little bit for me. I didn't see that he'd got it finished, just kind of went quiet. And on his blog, he described the whole project as exhausting. However, as a personal project, immensely satisfying to make. So he was pleased to get to the end of it. And I should try that. It just works out on a standard Amiga 500, 600. So I should try that one out. That one's called Final Fight Enhanced. But now there's a new project by Johnny Seven, and it's called Super Final Fight. And it looks to take things up a notch again while keeping it compatible with the Amiga 500. And I haven't seen much of this game in action, so I can't see or tell you how it moves yet. But the latest screenshots show the use of the Amiga's copper to really get that color palette and the gradients closer to the arcade original. And it does look fantastic in static screenshots. If you saw this on the back of a box, Dave, and it said Amiga screenshots, you might pick this one up. You might spend the £25 on it. It looks really good. And it sounds like he's in the final phases of developing it. He's working on the final levels. The final fight. He's facing the final fight to get this finished, Dave. He's facing the boss. This is the boss battle now, and then we might get to try it out for ourselves. It looks closer to the arcade original, particularly those colors. What do you make of this? What have you seen of this one?
Capcom, the first game that they did that had all the elements kind of together was Final Fight, and they got so much right on it. It was a great game. I'm not so much of a fan of the setting that's in, but they got so much right. They had games before. They had Black Tiger that I've mentioned, and they had Magic Sword, but it wasn't this. This was the first kind of like this, and it came out round about the same time as Golden Axe, which we haven't mentioned yet. Golden Axe, more to my taste in terms of the setting, the fantasy setting. It really got the kind of D&D, kind of Conan the Barbarian thing going on there. Both games are fantastic. Both are both really feel good. I played Knights of the Round more than I played Final Fight. Knights of the Round was a kind of a sequel to this, set in kind of medieval stuff, a little bit more realistic than Golden Axe. And then, of course, I played Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, which is a fantastic game, arcade only. You and I played that for a short time in the cave, I think.
Yeah.
It's a great game.
It's got all the elements of Final Fight, just sort of taking up a notch. But what year did that came out? That was a bit.
That was
later,
a couple of years later. I think that was that 1.5 CPS 1.5 rather than CPS 1.
1993. Oh, that's a TV show. Yeah, because that was based on a TV show, wasn't it?
Yeah. So a few years later, anyway. Golden Axe, as you mentioned, so Double Dragon, as you mentioned, was good, but it was only good until Final Fight and Golden Axe came around, and then once they came around, you wouldn't want to go back to Double Dragon.
Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, it is 93 that the arcade came out. Yeah. So you've got to remember what happened between Final Fight and Cadillacs and Dinosaurs was Street Fighter 2. So there was that turn, and then we were moving into the 3D realms, weren't we?
But not a great deal happened in terms of advancement of the gameplay between Final Fight and Cadillacs and Dinosaurs. It was the same formula, maybe bigger sprites or more data moving about. I don't know. They're quite coin munchy though, that you do have to spend a bit on them. But that's just the nature of how it was in the arcade there. And you've mentioned something I was just about to say. I regret how much the 1v1 fighting games overshadowed them and really took over what Capcom did, because the time you got to Capcom, the Capcom system was CPS 1, CPS, I think 1.5, CPS 2, and CPS 3. And by the time you got to CPS 3, all the games, I think, were 1v1 fighters. That's all they were doing, because that's what everyone wanted. I've played them all apart from the D&D ones. because I want to wait until I finish the other ones before I go into the D&D ones, because I feel as if they might overshadow everything else, because they're supposedly a brilliant game to play. There's a bit of role playing elements in a coin operated arcade machine. And I'm very impressed by this port so far, using the Amiga's copper. You mentioned that's one of the custom chips in the Amiga, or part of a custom chip in the Amiga. That's a function of it, and it'll help get the colours it. But I'm not sure that I would choose to play this when I've got the MiSTer version that emulates it perfectly.
I think it's one of those situations where it would be really nice to take the disc, put it in a real Amiga 500, and play a really nice version of Final Fight. Just like I love going up to the Sharp 68,000 and playing Final Fight on that. That's a really lovely version. Like you say, if you've got a MiSTer or a Pi or something like that, you'll have to excuse the noise if my mic's picking it up. The recycling's coming down the street. So they're chucking all the recycling glass bins outside the window there. If you've got a MiSTer or a Pi, you're probably just going to load the arcade ROM, because all of these versions strive to be arcade perfect. So if you want to play arcade perfect, play the arcade. But if you're banging on real hardware, it's really nice to see. And we're definitely in an era where we're learning from these people what our favorite micros were truly capable of in the hands of people with talent, with passion, but more importantly, with no time pressures from publishers to get it shipped. So,
in fact, that's a really good point. When I mentioned to Hoffman about why aren't games from the period this good, he was quite defensive about games from the period and said, look, no one from the period had the time that I've had to make Second-Oid.
Yeah,
and that's why the games weren't as good, and that's a fair point to make.
We've heard stories in the past from the likes of the Oliver twins saying, yeah, we challenged ourselves to make a game in a weekend, or we tried to make a game every month, and they did, because it was all about get it done, ship it, make the money, get the next one.
They viewed it as a money printer, though.
Yeah. I mean, there are different extremes, but if you took as long as Hoffman took to make his game, it would be considered it would be described in magazines as development hell, even though he was having fun and making progress and making a better game. That's the category it probably would have been put into. So really interesting. We're seeing games like the Le Mans racing game that we talked about recently on the Atari STE, and how smooth that can be with sprite scaling. The twin stick shooters of Hoffman's game, and we've got the Final Fight projects showing just how close our machines could get to arcade hardware. Under the right conditions, seeing what the 68,000 in the Amiga can do compared to the 68,000 in the arcade, and the different custom chips and how it could get there. And I guess what all this amounts to is that not just that this project, Super Final Fight, is worth checking out, but just that it's a truly brilliant time to be in retro.
Le temps, la vie, l'amour. Housekeeping by Dave.
Our kind friend Banjo Guy Ollie has made that housekeeping jingle. I'm not quite sure when the perfume will go on sale.
What does it smell of? Can you describe it?
It smells of victory.
It smells of victory.
Yeah. Victory.
Cardboard boxes and must.
Victory. We have no new patrons this week, Neil. Nobody loves us.
Well, we had an influx last week. So
we had 7 last week. We shouldn't be greedy.
Yes, thank you to everyone who continues to support the show. We do appreciate it. At patreon.com/This Week in Retro if you want to support us.
Another podcast, Overscan, from the guys at Into the Vertical Blank, have done a showdown of us versus the Retro Hour.
Fight.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you to Steve and Jeff for your kind words. Did you see what they said about me, Neil?
They said you were the best retro podcaster in the world, Dave.
In the world.
Unbelievable. They had kind things to say about the Retro Hour as well.
Yeah, they had nothing bad to say about anyone.
Yeah.
It turns out that last week I was not entirely mad. So we talked about Indiana Jones, and we talked about the game that never was, how it went through development hell, and I did a quick rundown of the other indie games over the years. So I remembered Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine as a kind of a puzzle game, and I was wrong to do so. It's not. And then we wondered, was I making up a game that didn't exist? And thank you to our listeners who told me that no, I wasn't. It's a game called Night Shift from LucasArts.
As soon as I saw them post that, I thought, yes, because it was LucasArts and it had sort of props from LucasArts things in it. And I think it had some indie things in it. It wasn't an indie themed game, but it had Darth
Star
Vader
Wars
and
stuff. And aye. So thank you to everyone who pointed that out. I think Andrew Miller 2904 might have been the first. The second thing is that I ran through quite a few Tomb Raider inspired indie games and didn't mention Uncharted, which is pretty much a new take on that without the IP. In fact, it's got its own fairly okay-ish film, and I'm told they even used Harrison Ford for adverts for the game. And the third, and that this is the one that had everybody queuing up to tell us, is that there is a new game due out this year, and it's from Bethesda. Because we wanted to have a Bethesda Indiana Jones game. We asked for it.
Didn't we?
Yeah. Now, it's literally what we asked for. Happy Coding might have been the first to tell us. Bethesda are the publisher, though, but it's not quite the Bethesda game that I was imagining, and I'm not sure if it's what you want, Neil. I'll describe it to you, and you can tell me. I meant a Skyrim-type game, but what's coming is just your normal, modern console-style game. It is on the PC as well. It's called an action-adventure, but I thought it's also a stealth game. There will be optional puzzle elements, but you can just fight your way in through instead. And to me, it just looks like more of the same modern games that I don't enjoy. Some get called RPGs, some get called adventures, some get called shooters, some get called stealth games. But from where I'm sitting, they're all console controller dexterity games. And while I've played a few of them, I've bounced off most of them, and I don't enjoy them.
I did go, once you mentioned this to me, I did go on the Steam page and watch the trailer. And yes, there's some really great looking elements of it. But I agree with you. There's almost this console style game that you've just described there that falls into the same almost too linear category that FMV games used to fall into. So, everything is rendered, everything is 3D. It's not pre-rendered or anything like that. You've got full freedom. But actually, you still have to keep it fairly linear because either you have to follow the set route through the game and follow the set pieces, or you create an open world that you can explore. You can't really have a halfway house where you've got a slightly open world and then you run into invisible barriers and you feel constricted. That doesn't really work. So it has to be one or the other, doesn't it?
I'm sure some of our listeners will be mildly annoyed at me for saying this, but I would put... I was told about Dark Souls being a great RPG. It's not an RPG. I was told about Assassin's Creed being a great game, about Shadows of Mordor, about Batman Arkham Asylum. And to me, they're all basically the same game. You're all doing the same thing with your controller, and I don't really enjoy it. I'm not saying they're bad games at all. Just because I don't like them doesn't make them bad games. But to me, they're the same type of game. Whereas there's all the Jedi ones as well. Whereas other people, I'm sure, will see this was an RPG, that was an adventure, that was a stealth game, that was a shooter. But for me, it's the same kind of thing. Remember the controller combinations you need to do and repeat the combinations in the right order to get through.
Indie always deserves a chance, though. So I am going to give it a chance. See how the reviews are when it comes out, and maybe give it a go. But what made me laugh when I looked at the Steam page was there was a screenshot which was exactly what I described in last week's show, which was when I said to you, wouldn't it be great if you had this game where Indy was at the pyramids and he got involved in a chase, and you can go around the pyramids, and then there is a screenshot on the page of Indy by the Sphinx and the Great Pyramids with the Nazis or whoever the baddies are in this game, holding him up, and that's exactly what I described. How did we not know about this game? So thank you to the listeners for pointing out our stupidity. Modern gaming is not our specialist subject.
No, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, it's called. Indiana Jones, the Great Circle. We described we wanted it last week. Now we know it exists, so we don't want it anymore.
Can I just point out, that's a bit of a rubbish name, isn't it?
Yeah, the Great Circle.
The Great Circle.
Is it
the
a
Last
reference?
Crusade, the Fate of Atlantis.
The sequel is going to be the Triangle.
Raiders
and they're
of
going
the
to go
Lost
through all
Ark.
4 buttons on the controller.
The Great Circle. It's a bit flat for me.
The Circle of Life. On to briefs. From Superfly82.
Briefs.
From Superfly82, there is a free Amiga book, The Top 50 Games, Volume 1. And it's from a podcast. I didn't know about this podcast.
Oh, yes. I know this one, yeah.
Paul Driscoll, Gordon King. Paul Driscoll, that name rings a bell. Gordon King and Richard Yaxley. And it's the first 25. And it's from the podcast RGDS Podcast. So I'll be giving that a listen. It's 4 hours this episode, though. So I'll be giving that a listen over the course of a few days, I imagine. But yeah, they've made a book. You can download it. It's free to read.
AMS CPC464, good username that, has posted on the Reddit, by the way, which is reddit.com/r/this week in retro, if you'd like to submit your news stories. He's posted a story about a never released Sega console that will hit the market soon, thanks to a Brazilian company. So what this is an FPGA based console in that recently sculpted Neptune recreation case, and it will run all of your favorite Sega consoles in FPGA. So keep an eye out for that one.
From Solipsium, a new emulator for the famous Roland SC55 is out. So this is what was used in Doom, for example, by Bobby Prince to make the famous music. If you want to play Doom and have it sound just like it did to Bobby Prince, then you need a Roland SC55. This runs on a modern PC, and you tie it into DOSBox, for example. You can use it with a vintage PC, but only by connecting a MIDI out on your PC to the modern PC. We do have the MT32 Pi, which is a faithful recreation of the predecessor to this. So the MT30, the Roland MT32 is what you would have on your older DOS games, Monkey Island, for example, some of the Sierra games.
Pre-MIDI, technically, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. It's MIDI, but before the general MIDI standard was created. The MT32 is one, and then the one that came after, before we went to CD audio, was the SC55. Very, very few games were on anything else other than the SC55 and the MT32. So we can do the SC55 with soft fonts, but this will be a more faithful recreation of the SC55. I hope eventually it ends up in a little project like the MT32. Maybe Dopefish that does the project, the MT32 Pi, will eventually integrate this into it. I don't know.
We are just going to end up with the Pi-based universal sonic screwdriver add-on card for PCs, aren't we? We're going to get there. It's nice.
I like the idea of being able to replace what you want to replace with it. So if it's a Gravis Ultrasound, very expensive, use a Pi. But if it's just a normal AGP graphics card or PCI graphics card, you probably don't need to get a Pi for that. So yeah, I'm quite pleased to see that. In fact, our friend Reese covered it in more detail on his ramble this week.
42 NoBod42 has submitted a magazine clipping. We like seeing old magazine adverts. It's for the 10 megabyte computer system, which includes an 8-bit microprocessor with an optional 16-bit microprocessor. Doesn't say which ones. It's got memory mapped video display. It's got 64K of RAM as standard, a 10-slot motherboard, a 28 amp power supply, and a 12-inch monitor, all for the low price of $5,995. I'm not sure what year this is from. It looks like the late 70s. But wow, thank goodness computers don't cost $6,000 anymore.
A trailer for the Computer History of Australia from Juicy Cow, no doubt featuring the good old Dick Smith.
The Seattle Living Computer Museum is sadly closing down. It shut down during the pandemic, and they've decided they will not be reopening it. Now, this was founded originally by Paul Allen, the co-founder of Microsoft with Bill Gates back in the day. And, well, it seems he needs the money. So their estate is selling absolutely everything from the Living Computer Museum. Real shame, because it looks like it was a good one. There's some great pictures from it. So
I've heard some chatter. I don't know how accurate it is, but it's describing it as rather cynical. The family just don't care, they just want the money. Right. Sell everything, shut it down, sell everything, we don't care. So perhaps that's an argument that people who run museums should have some kind of written will as to what should happen to the stuff in the museum.
Yeah. And that story was submitted by, as I furiously scroll through the reddit.com/r/this week in retro to find it, Starcade 2084. Thank you for submitting that story.
Shepo71 lets us know about a Eurogamer where Sony is doing emulation of, I think it's the PlayStation 2 on the PlayStation 5, and poor upscaling, disappointing filters and so on. They're not doing a very good job of it, is what this article is saying. So you could, the PlayStation 2 emulator, disappointing effort, it says. You could say that is a bad thing. I mean, companies are struggling to make good emulation to sell their old catalogues. On the other hand, you could say that unlike 15 years ago, there is now a market for them which sounds good for them to sell their old stuff rather than let it languish on abandonware sites where it's difficult to access. And if they do put these emulators on, and presumably they'll get better over time, then that will open up what is a fantastic library for the PlayStation 2 for people to enjoy with less hassle.
We've already got a correction from my last brief about the Living Computer Museum, Dave. You mentioned about the proceeds going to the family. It is actually going to charity. So
it is.
That's nice. Yeah, according to the story here, proceeds are going to charity.
Oh, that's good news. So maybe I've heard nonsense then.
Yeah.
Good.
Manger has posted a blog post about the history of Sony's biggest CRT TV that they ever made. This was a 43-inch monster weighing in at a back-breaking 204 kilograms or 450 pounds. So do reinforce your floors if you're getting one of these. And the link to that story and everything else we discuss is in the show notes. And it's a great story just to read about just how extreme things got if you had the money to throw at it.
How big is your biggest CRT in the cave?
It is a Sony PVM, and I think it's 28 inches. I mean, we've got 32-inch widescreen, but 4x3, I think, is 28-inch.
Yeah, 28 inches 4x3 is a lot bigger than 32-inch widescreen.
But thankfully, that one's got grab handles because it's a PVM, so it's quite easy to lift with two people. But the 32 inches are right handful. Yeah, carry on.
Christ of Why Don't You likes a Eurogame article on Loom, which they call a family-friendly classic with lessons for today's games. And one thing I like about Loom, and this isn't the only thing I like about it, I'm not damning it with faint praise, but one thing I like about Loom is it's nice and short, and modern games could take a lesson from that.
Only if you can solve the puzzles.
Yes, thank you, Neil. It lasts forever if you don't solve any puzzles.
It's a game that I started playing 35 years ago. Christ of Why Don't You has submitted a story about 30 years of FreeDOS. This was first released on June 29th, 1994. And FreeDOS, of course, is it open source? I think it's open source.
I believe so.
If it's not open source, it's at least freeware. To keep the DOS dream alive, give you DOS compatibility on modern hardware. It continues to be updated, and it continues to be, well, a nice alternative to DOSBox or emulation or other ways of doing things. It's a nice compatible way of using DOS on modern hardware. Happy birthday, FreeDOS.
And there's more on the subreddit. There's loads more on the subreddit, but those are the top 10 stories that we picked from this week.
Where do we go, Dave?
We go to reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro. If I could stop the world, maybe with an emergency button, Neil? Emergency button to stop the world?
Oh, you've got one there.
If I could stop the world, if I could put myself into a Red Dwarf-like timeless place where I could do what I wanted and do it forever, play games, read books, watch box sets and movies, would I play all the games I've ever bought? I don't know. I shelves and shelves full of them. You can only see the half of it. The shelves all round me. And I've got more in crates. And of course, I own loads and loads of digital games. And I have extensive archives of what we'll call abandonware. I'll never play them all. I have, however, justified it in my head by saying that anytime I buy a game, there's at least a chance I will play it, or I might want to. And I really do mean that. I might want to. I'm thoroughly enjoying a blog just now, the CRPG Addict, where he aims to play every RPG in chronological order. And I can't believe how good he's making some of these old games sound. Some of these games from back in kind of Ultima 3, Ultima 4 times. He's doing it properly, though. He's got a notepad. He's making maps. He's making notes of the clues he's told to find out. And that's how you have to do it. He's not looking at walkthroughs, no spoilers. And he's got a rule of he will play at least 6 hours of a game, and only if after 6 hours he's not enjoying it will he stop. And I'm pretty sure it'll lead me to play some of his highlights. But today's submission is from Juicy Cow, and it's about Steam. Now, Steam started just round about the time that LGR started on YouTube, a little bit before that. And there's an article on PC Games N that says out of all the registered Steam accounts in the world, only 10%, or about 73 million in Steam ID's Finders database, are public. And based on data from these accounts, we calculate that collectively there's around $1.9 billion or £1.4 billion worth of games that have been purchased and then never played even a single time. So if you multiply that by 10, because only 10% are visible, to roughly account for all the Steam profiles are not public, you arrive at £15 billion or $19 billion, more than the gross national product of Nicaragua, Niger, Chad, or Mauritius. So, using Steam Finder reveals your pile of shame, and I'll tell you mine in a minute. Now, most of my games are retro games that I bought, and old games to come back to at some point. And I bought them through fear of missing out. I'm crippled with FOMO. A bargain, I better buy it. I can't miss out. I've now successfully stopped myself from buying games, and I've told myself I can only buy any digital game when I want to play it, and not to worry about it. If I want to buy a game and I want to play it, then just buy it and play it. Otherwise, stop buying all these games. I need to do that because otherwise the FOMO gets me. But when it comes to physical games like Second and so on, buy it because that's the chance. Plus, I feel as if I need to support them to keep them going. My pile of shame, though, there are 137 unplayed games in my pile of shame. I've only played 42% of the games in my collection. And my pile of shame value is in dollars. It's $1,661.87, enough to buy 4 Steam Decks. Now, there's a little bit of an issue here with that. They've listed them all at full price, and I didn't pay full price for them. I bought them when they've been on sale, when they've been a bundle or something like that. So I don't think it's quite fair to do it that way. I did ask Duncan and Neil to generate theirs, but unfortunately, you need to have your games public for it. And even after you make it public, there's a delay before it can access them.
Yeah, I tried making mine public, and it's just, I did it a couple of hours ago, and it's still not updating and telling me. So I'll try again at a later date.
What do you think it is, Neil? Similar to me?
It's going to be a lot less than you because I have quite a small Steam library, to be honest. I've got my actual Steam library up here, and it's something like 107 games in total. So you've got more unplayed games than I have in my entire Steam library, Dave. That's how much shame you have. My most played game is a game called Just Survive, which used to be called H1Z1. And the reason for that is it was very much a social space. It was a zombie survival game, but I used to play it a lot with a group of friends, and we would just hang out every evening, chat, go on stupid missions, raiding other teams, taking the mickey out of them, all of that stupid fun stuff that you do. And the game, sadly, the developers stopped working on it, and it kind of fell on its face, and we moved on from there. Other well-played games, Heroes and Generals, No Man's Sky, Golf with Your Friends.
I enjoy playing that with you, Neil.
Thunder Helix, of course. So those are some of the games. It's far from the only place that I play games, Steam. And as you know, I'm not a massive modern gamer. I do quite a bit of gaming on my Switch, which I really enjoy. So they're not showing up. And GOG and all the other places of getting games from. So that gives you a little bit of insight. But yeah, unfortunately, I can't generate my pile of shame stats, but I can say with utter confidence they would be less shameful than your 137 unplayed games.
Most of mine, I think, are from Humble Bundles. And I've stopped buying those because even if they are 15 games for a tenner, it's still a waste of money for me, because if I don't play the games ever, then it's not a saving. So my advice is, don't buy a game until you're just about ready to play it. But in the meantime, have a look at the link in the subreddit, take it through and see what your pile of shame is. I'd be interested to see if your pile of shame is bigger than mine, if I'm an outlier, or if I'm typical for people who can't resist a bargain. FOMO.
Time now for our community question of the week. And last week, of course, we were talking about Indiana Jones, or as I always laugh when I see my, the wall that I've got tiled with floppy disks in the kitchen at the cave. There is a pirated copy of The Last Crusade in there. And on the handwritten on the label, it says Indian Jones. So, so Indian Jones was a knockoff. Tomb Raider was a knockoff of Indian Jones. Shark Jaws was a knockoff of Jaws. What other games are blatantly ripping something else off, was our question, be it the title, the cover art, or the game itself. What game is definitely something else in everything but name? Right, let's go and look at our answers. Have you locked down the answers this week?
I have.
Okay, so our top answer is from Sybil66, who says the most egregious one, Great Gianna or Guyana Sisters. Nintendo were onto that like flies on jam and had it removed from the shelves within a week or two, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
Wasn't quite quick enough, as I managed to buy a copy for my Amiga before then. Still have it on my shelf. No idea if the disc works or not. Well, that would be worth a lot of money. The story goes that Nintendo threatened but didn't have it removed. And the publishers, was it Rainbow Arts, removed it in fear. So it didn't actually reach legal action. It probably would have done, but the threat was enough. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a game for the ST that came out quite a few years later called Super Stereo Land. So it's Mario with ST in front of it. And it's the same idea. It's a really good Mario clone. And of course, I've just been reading the Masters of Doom, and before that, what was the John Romero book called? I can't remember.
Masters of Doom or Doom Guy?
Doom Guy, that's it. Doom Guy, and then Masters of Doom. And of course, one of the big things that got id started was them doing a port, an entirely accurate port, I think, of Super Mario 3, which Nintendo looked at and said, this is great. We've no interest in the PC, though, so you can't use it, which they had to turn into Commander Keen. So it looks like copying Super Mario was a big deal. Happy Coding has 3D Star Strike. I don't think I need to say any more, do I? Except perhaps, as Dave mentioned in the show, they could get away with it back then in a way they surely couldn't do today.
Yeah, so that was just Star Wars, effectively, wasn't it? 3D Star Strike. Tungsten Orchid says Fallout series of games and A Boy and His Dog. Colony Activist replies, it was also an inspiration for Mad Max.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So A Boy and His Dog's a 1975 science fiction, a bit of a comedy element to it as well, based on a book from Harlan Ellison. It's basically about a boy in a post-apocalyptic wilderness with his dog. So clearly dog meat from Fallout comes from that, and Mad Max as well.
It's a 1975 film. The dog looks like... what was the Disney film where the guy turns into a dog and starts talking?
Oh, aye.
It's a sheepdog of that... Well, yeah, that kind of dog, isn't it?
I'm good. Canticle for Leibowitz. When was that? 1959 was a Canticle for Leibowitz. So that's post-apocalyptic as well. So I guess there's a whole genre there.
Lots of other answers. A8-bit says Horace was a massive rip-off merchant. Hungry Horace was Pac-Man. Horace Goes Skiing was Frogger. Horace and the Spiders was Space Panic. Yeah, rip-off merchant Horace.
Get Horace sued. Get them in court for copyright.
Any other answers that stand out for you there, Dave?
Monkey Island, and I've said, well, Monkey Island series of games and Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Disneyland. That's in Tungsten Orchid. I'm not sure, because I've said this before. Monkey Island was inspired by On Stranger Tides, which was a fairly short but really good novel, as was Pirates of the Caribbean at Disneyland. I'm not sure if Monkey Island was based on Pirates of the Caribbean on its own or based on both.
Yeah.
But yeah,
A
you can't say
shared
Pirates of
inspiration.
the Caribbean was based on something else.
Guybrush Loves Tesla says Football Glory was a huge rip-off of Sensible Soccer on the Amiga, and it absolutely was. I remember when that game came out, you looked at the screenshots and you went, oh, Sensible Software have brought out a new version of Sensible Soccer, a retro version of it, Football Glory or whatever it was, because it had the sepia photos of guys in long shorts on the front. No, it was just a complete rip-off by a totally different company. Shocking.
Going back to Mario, Fiskett says Mario is a Popeye rip-off. Peach is olive oil, Bowser, Donkey Kong are Bluto or Brutus, and the mushrooms are spinach. And Happy Coding says, kind of. Miyamoto originally wanted the original Donkey Kong game to be a Popeye game, but couldn't get the sprites to look as he wanted, so he adapted the characters and made original ones.
Popeye was the Nintendo game, arcade game that came out in 82, but Donkey Kong came out in 81. Donkey Kong came out first, which had Mario in it, and you rescued the princess from the gorilla at the top. Whereas Popeye, same kind of layout. You've got Blutus chasing you around. Blutus.
Yeah,
it is Blutus, isn't it?
Yeah.
I had in my head Bluto. I'm confusing Pluto.
I think it is called both.
Blutus.
Yeah.
Whatever he's called.
Yeah.
And it's a very similar game, but Donkey Kong came first. So it doesn't really add up unless you're thinking about Mario, which is a completely different game again. Any other answers? Tomb Raider. Colin the Activist says Tomb Raider is a massive rip-off of the hugely popular Tom Brady game series. What is Tom Brady? What is Tom Brady? It's a male cosplay of Lara Croft that IGN have done. As a fun link. Go and click on that. Lots of great answers in there. Rip-offs of Rambo. Snapper. Richard Shears says Grand Prix Simulator from Codemasters was a good version of Super Sprint. Yeah, we talked about that before.
Yeah.
Lots of great answers. So go and check out the subreddit to read last week's answers or take part in this week's question of the week, which is, what does your Steam pile of shame look like? Share your stats with us. Share your steaming pile with us. And tell us the stats and see how they compare to Dave's. Have you spent, enough for how many Steam Decks on games you've never played? To find out your stats, you need to make sure that your game list is public in your Steam profile, which it may well be already unless you've turned it off, and go to widget.steamfinder.com. You pop in your Steam ID and it will give you your stats. Do come and share them with us. Or if you don't want to do that and you just want to share some Steam stats, let us know your most played games, your least played games, and why. Just let us know your Steam stories, but also your Steam Finder stats if you can. Bit of an open-ended question this week, but we're just interested to hear your stats. So go and take part at reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro, where you can submit news stories. Please do submit as many news stories as you can for us to work with for our shows and to discuss. Take part in the question of the week, and don't forget to go and say hello to LGR in his latest video and thank him for his 15 years of service to Retro and all that entertainment that he's brought us. Anything else to add, Dave, before we wrap it up?
No, we'll see him next week.
Yeah, okay. See you next week. Thanks for listening, everyone, and take care. Bye-bye. Don't forget to subscribe. He's waving.
Oh, we passed 9,000.
Oh, we did, yes.
9,000.
9,000 subscribers.
9,000 of you out there.
We're heading for 10,000. Yay. We'll do an extra big wave if we hit 10,000.
This Week in Retro was presented by Neil from RMC The Cave and Dave. It was produced by me, Duncan Styles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcaster, including Apple Podcast and Spotify, and the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/This Week in Retro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. If you watch This Week in Retro on YouTube, please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.
Oh, Bomba Jedi. Who's are you, sir?